Warning: this presentation contains disturbing ideas and controversial content. Watch it at your own discretion.
This won't be easy to hear, but right now, the U.S. government is plotting one of the most unthinkable acts of financial tyranny ever conceived. And the unsuspecting target of their planned attack? You.
Specifically, the government conspiring with the Federal Reserve is engineering the equivalent of a financial bear trap designed to lure you in and then snap shut, locking you into an inescapable financial plot that'll slowly drain your entire life savings. This may sound unbelievable, but as you're about to see, it's the absolute truth. And not only have they laid their plans, the wheels are already in motion. But if you're willing to listen to this message, not only will you fully understand the incredible deception they're plotting, you'll also discover exactly what you need to do to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your entire financial future, to survive and prosper while everyone else falls victim to the government scheme. You see, the government has buried itself under a mountain of debt. Since 1980, for 32 long years, there have only been 4 years when the government has managed to live within its means. In every other year, they've had to borrow billions to cover their unchecked spending. That's not a track record. That's an addiction. And now they're out of options. Desperate, they've resorted to a financial Hail Mary play to salvage their balance sheet at individual investors' expense. Because unless they take some immediate action to deal with this ticking financial time bomb, the likelihood of them defaulting on it is all but guaranteed. And a default by the U.S. on its debt payments would be catastrophic. Panic would erupt in financial markets around the world that would make the meltdown of 2008 look like a blip on the charts. Stocks you hold in your portfolio would plummet and treasury bonds would become worthless, reduced to junk status. Unleashed inflation would quickly cause the prices you pay for everything to double, triple, even quadruple. Left unprotected, virtually every penny of your life savings would be wiped out. And no one, not the Treasury, not the Fed, or any combination of global financial powers would be able to stop it. They know the timer on the debt bomb they've armed is ticking ever closer to imminent default. Simple math will prove it, and they need a way to defuse it now. So they've had to hatch a plan B. They're laying a simple yet cunningly deceptive plot that'll let them pay down their massive federal debt by stealing the money from you and other unsuspecting, hardworking American investors. By draining it from your savings, your investments, your real estate, your wealth, everything you've worked for your entire life. They're planning to secretly sell you and every other American saver into financial slavery in order to pay for their excesses. And what's really frightening is the wheels are already in motion. The bottom line is this: the government has financially failed you and the rest of the country. And now, in an act of extraordinary arrogance, they're going to use the powers at their disposal to dump the burden of their sins squarely onto you. They're going to round you up and lead you like sheep to the slaughter. I promise this will be the greatest plundering of private American wealth in the history of our country. It's a plan that'll threaten everything you own: your paycheck, your savings, your investments, your retirement, your home and real estate, your entire future. Everything you've ever worked for in your life will be in Washington and the Fed's crosshairs, if you let them. That's why I've produced this important message, because you deserve the right to tell them no. You won't stand to be their patsy. You won't be a victim of their wealth-draining scheme. And I want to show you how. Frankly, I'm doing it at great risk to my professional reputation, because it's that important. It's a message no mainstream media is willing to deliver, yet it's one that threatens every single American. Once you understand the incredible threat that's facing you, you'll understand what you need to escape their clutches and capitalize on opportunities that'll actually grow your wealth, even in the face of the government and the Fed's sinister wealth siphoning plans. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. For now, and more importantly, I have to explain what the government has in store for you and your money. And to do that, we need to take a look at the monster that's threatening your very future. There's a word for when you can't make the minimum payment on a debt you owe. It's called default, and it's on the horizon for our federal government. The debt the government has currently piled up is massive by its own admission, $14.7 trillion at the end of 2011. By the end of 2012, they expect to be in a hole $16.3 trillion deep. But these ridiculous debt numbers our national balance sheet is carrying aren't the problem facing the government. The real problem is their ability to service that debt, to make what your credit card would call the minimum payments on what they owe. because those minimum payments have very quickly gotten out of control. Between 2000 and 2011, the annual amount they owe in interest alone has compounded by over 25%, from nearly $362 billion to over $454 billion. And I assure you, it'll be even more next year. This explosion in their interest on the debt has created a tipping point in Washington, one that, if it's not addressed sooner rather than later, can only lead to one end: default, and all its catastrophic consequences. They know it all too well, but they're lying to everyone about the severity of the problem. The truth is, the interest alone on the national debt is eating our country alive, pushing us to the brink of insolvency. But the government is doing everything they can to hide that truth. In 2011, the White House's Office of Management and Budget, the cabinet-level cronies whose job it is to advise the president on the national budget, officially reported the interest they owe on their debt was 6.4% of their budgeted outlays, all the money that the government spent. Now, an annual interest expense of 6.4% wouldn't be a terrible burden if it were true, but it's not. As with so many government statistics, that number has been fudged, masked, and dramatically reduced through the government's sleight-of-hand math. The reality in those budgeted outlays, the money the government spent, were nearly 1.6 times their revenue. That means they had to borrow nearly 36 cents for every dollar they spent. And that includes the interest on the debt they already owe. Imagine earning $50,000 a year and owing your credit card company $10,000 a year just to cover the interest on your bill alone. That's the kind of pressure the government is under. In some ways, the government is worse off than most Americans. And the chunk of government revenue their interest payments consume is only going to get bigger, because they have to keep taking on more and more debt simply to make those minimum payments. Never mind paying back the actual principal. That money, in my opinion, will never get paid back to their creditors. The Wall Street Journal reported, "It's true that the U.S. government has never been more dependent on financial markets to pay its bills. The net issuance of Treasury securities is now a whopping 8.6% of gross domestic product, GDP, on average per annum, more than double its pre-crisis historical peak. At the exponential rate the government's minimum payments have been piling up, it won't be long before they consume 25%, 50%, and even more of the government's revenues. A tipping point of financial disaster there will be no escape from. No amount of taxing the rich will fix this problem." In 1916, the richest man in America, John D. Rockefeller, could have written a personal check and paid off the entire national debt. Today, Bill Gates could liquidate his entire net worth and only pay 2 months' interest. Today, the reality is all they can hope to do is keep borrowing so they can keep making their minimum payments. The entire financial stability of our country, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodity prices, is riding on their ability to make these payments. And if that weren't enough, their problem gets worse. Getting anyone to fund these payments is getting harder and harder. The entire financial stability of our country, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodity prices, is riding on their ability to make these payments. Both U.S. and foreign sources of financing for our interest payments have been fleeing in droves. If that doesn't make the situation dire, I don't know what does. That means since the financial meltdown, 2 out of every 3 foreign investors who were willing to fund our debt have turned their backs on the U.S. And here in the U.S., all but 2 investors in 10 have walked away. There's no one left to pick up the slack, and there's a very good reason for that. That means within the next year, we'll owe more than our entire country is worth. And that puts us perilously close to a tipping point of default. In other words, any bet on the U.S. will be a losing bet. The government knows it. Investors in our debt know it. And like I said before, so does the government. They're stalling for time. For the time being, they've implemented a plan to stop the bleeding. But it's like putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging patient. The Federal Reserve has stepped in to fill the lending gap by buying the government's debt to put on its own books. Typically, the Fed buys less than 1% of the government's Treasury issues. But in 2011, they purchased a mind-boggling 61% of the government's debt. 61%. That's 6,000 times more than usual. In fact, the Fed has bought so much debt in the past 2 years alone, they have become the second biggest creditor to the United States government in the world, holding $1.65 trillion of government debt. But they can't keep up this buying spree for long without creating even more problems, because when the Fed steps in to buy treasuries like this, it's called monetizing the debt. That's a fancy sounding phrase that means they pay for it by creating money out of thin air. Our ability to print money like this is one of the reasons we haven't defaulted already. But they can't do that forever, and they know it. Printing trillions of dollars like they've been doing risks both massive inflation and a massive devaluation of your money. It'll destroy the purchasing power of every dollar you have and send the prices of the very basics you need to survive through the roof. Every economy that has tried to print its way out of a debt problem like this has incurred the wrath of hyperinflation. Between 1993 and 1995, Yugoslavia experienced a crushing episode of hyperinflation that at one point saw prices double in under a day and a half. In 2008, Zimbabwe began printing trillions of dollars to pay off loans to the International Monetary Fund. This sparked an episode of hyperinflation even worse than Yugoslavia, with prices doubling nearly every 24 hours. Now, this isn't fiction. These are documented case studies of what excessive debt funded by rampant money creation can do. And don't think for 1 second this can't happen in the U.S. These kinds of out-of-control price spirals, along with the crushing effects that they have on individuals' wealth and standards of living, are the direct result of nothing more than creating money out of thin air in an economy that is not creating an equal amount of value. Piling up debt in excess of your GDP and then printing money to pay for it. Minimum interest payments the government must borrow to make, with no one willing to lend to us. The Fed risking massive inflation, sending prices everywhere skyrocketing, just to delay an imminent default. And deficit projections plainly showing the country will be insolvent in a matter of years. If at some point in the very near future the government doesn't act to reduce its debt, it's going to default. They know it, and now you know it. It's a no-win situation, one that would seem hopeless. But they've devised a plan. An obscure little-known tactic that will let them reduce their debt and put a tourniquet on the financial hemorrhaging. A way for them to get their hands on money they need to pay down their obligations without anyone suspecting where it's coming from. A way for them to raise the appearance of fiscal responsibility without actually having to face the music of austerity. They're going to steal it. But this will be bigger than any bank heist in the history of our country. It's probably the most insidious plan they've ever hatched, because it's aimed at you and every other hardworking American. Right now, prudent Americans everywhere are about to be made unsuspecting victims of a government double-cross that'll drain your wealth, your savings, to pay for their misdeeds. Let me pull back the curtain and show you what they're plotting. Say you were $100,000 in debt, and miraculously you found a place where you could borrow money at a negative interest rate. That means you could borrow $100,000 to pay off your current debt. But when that money you borrowed came due, you were only obligated to pay back $98,000. I know it sounds crazy, but just bear with me for a minute. Now let's say the time comes to pay back the $98,000. What if you could go back to the same lender and borrow $98,000 to pay it off, but then only have to pay back $96,000? In a matter of time, you'd be debt-free. And best of all, you wouldn't be the one who was paying off your debt. It would be the person losing money by lending to you at that negative rate of return. Now, no one in their right mind would ever loan you money at a nominally negative rate. That would simply be insane. You'd have to hold a gun to their heads. But when you earn a return less than the rate of inflation, that's exactly what you're doing. Now, under normal circumstances, you'd never have to worry about negative returns. Market forces would automatically demand returns that takes inflation into account. But now the government has begun to manipulate the entire financial landscape to their advantage, with a simple but devious two-step plan to use your money to pay their bad debts. Let me show you what they have up their sleeves. The first thing they need to do is keep the rates they pay on what they borrow below the rate of inflation, below the rate at which the cost of goods around you rise year after year. By doing this, they'll have effectively engineered an environment of negative real interest rates. So how are they doing this? Chicago Fed President Charles Evans has proposed a rule saying the Fed should commit to keeping rates at zero as long as core inflation is below 3% or unemployment is above 7%. It's easy enough for the Fed to control their own short-term rates. But they've also committed to keeping long-term rates artificially low as well. How? With all the government bond buying they've been doing. The interest rate of a bond is inversely linked to its price. When bond prices are bid up, their overall yield effectively gets pushed lower. So the longer the Fed keeps buying, the longer bond rates will stay depressed. So that's step one. Keep interest rates artificially below the rate of inflation. So the government has the means to keep their borrowing cost at a minimum, but they still have another problem facing them. With so many investors unwilling to buy their debt, they have to find a way to create demand for their debt, a way to force investors' money into their subpar investments. How can they do that? Simple. They're going to start using capital controls. Regulations like caps on interest rates, taxes on securities transactions, regulating international investments, and even prohibiting the purchase of certain investments. Now, if you think it's beyond the government's power to forcibly tell you what you do with your money, you'd better think again. Not only can they do it, they've done it before. How? Well, they can simply take it by force. During the panic of the Great Depression, President Roosevelt unilaterally declared it illegal for private citizens to own gold. With the stroke of a pen, he took away Americans' rights to own a specific investment class. Everyone was forced to turn their physical gold into the government, for which they were paid $22 per ounce. Once they had everyone's gold in hand, the government turned around and revalued the price of gold to $35 an ounce. In an instant, every hardworking American had lost 60% of their wealth while the government's asset value increased. Of course, they have more subtle ways of accomplishing this as well, by taking away your options for earning more. Back in the early 1990s, as they tried to save the financial system from the savings and loan crisis, the Fed held short-term rates artificially low. This allowed banks to rebuild their balance sheets by borrowing from the Fed at 3% and investing in treasuries yielding nearly 7%, and pocketing significantly more than they otherwise would have. Today, financial regulators encourage banks to hold government debt. They do this by allowing them to use these safe assets not only as reserve requirements, but also as collateral when making loans with each other. They can regulate pension and mutual fund holdings so that certain percentages must be in their safe debt. They have dozens of tools at their disposal right now that'll let them force your money into their negative rate debt. Believe me, this isn't idle speculation. Now, this whole scenario may sound like something out of a George Orwell or Robert Ludlum novel, but believe me, it's not. The fact is, it's economic reality. The U.S. government has done it before. At the end of World War II, the U.S. had amassed an enormous debt funding the war. By 1945, the government owed over 120% of its GDP to creditors. Over the next 10 years, however, by implementing these same tactics, they were able to reduce their debt to GDP ratio by 70%. All at the expense of unsuspecting investors. Returns didn't go back to normal until the 1980s. That means they got away with their cash grab for over 30 years. It's a tactic that's been dubbed financial repression, a forced lending to the government by captive domestic investors like pension funds and banks. Remember that term. I predict you're going to hear it a lot more in the future because they've launched it again. By manipulating interest rates and using capital controls, they've launched a last-ditch attempt to save themselves from the looming catastrophe they've created. Today, and possibly for the next 10 years or more, you're going to be paying their bill. You'll be collecting 2 cents on every dollar you invest while you're paying 5 cents or more for everything you buy. Your savings will be drained, your retirement funds will be cut short, your assets will be devalued to pennies on every dollar you invested in them, and your children's future won't be much brighter. Your ability to put food on your dinner table, to pay your utility bills, to fill your car with gas, to support yourself and your loved ones at even a basic level will be compromised, unless you take action to prevent the government from tapping into and draining your wealth, from confiscating your hard-earned savings. But what can you do? How can you escape the clutches of a desperate government? How can you start to rebuild your wealth even in the face of what they have planned for you? You need a system. A complete and objective solution that will show you not only how to survive the coming era of negative returns, but prepare for virtually any eventuality that comes along with it. One that'll let you prosper while everyone around you slips helplessly into poverty. One that'll get you back on track growing your wealth. And then safeguard your savings and investments to ensure they not only pay you a return, but also crush inflation. One that carefully monitors and measures the actions of the investments themselves, ignoring the rhetoric and the BS the government spouts along with the nonsense from its right hand, the mainstream media. A technical system that will uncover in clear, objective terms the strongest investments you should be in and the dangers you should avoid like the plague. Today, it's more important than ever to arm yourself with such a system. If you don't, your fate may be sealed. I'd like to show you one right now. My name is Bill Polis. By and large, I'm just a regular Midwestern family man. No silver spoons here. I was born and raised right here in Michigan, where I learned common sense values. The ideas of education and hard work giving you the success you want. I've always tried to live those ideals in my life. I worked my way through college and earned a degree in industrial engineering. That's important, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And for years after college, I worked my way up to a high-level executive position in the auto industry. But almost 40 years ago, I discovered another passion, my true passion, trading the markets. Over that time, I put in countless hours studying market behavior and action in my home trading lab. That was where I discovered a brand new use for my industrial engineering training. You see, engineering is all about creating systems and then optimizing them to get the best possible results you can. Over the years, I've used my engineering skills to develop literally dozens of profitable trading systems and tools. And finally, over 10 years ago, I walked away from the corporate world. Today, I run a very successful financial research and education firm I call Profits Run. It's a family business I run with my son, Greg. We basically combine my nearly 40 years of market experience and knowledge with the dozens of trading systems I've developed and teach them to literally thousands of active, satisfied traders around the world. It's been a dream come true for me, helping aspiring traders to become successful by sharing what I've learned over the years. But I'm not here to talk to you about them today. Instead, I want to talk to you about something brand new and different. A simple to follow, done for you system I've created for you. One that'll help you potentially rebuild and safeguard your wealth against the government's plans. It's one I believe you need because your options are running out. Simply trying to avoid the government's wealth trap by heading back to the stock market won't save you. Take a look at this chart. For the past decade, you can clearly see that the market has rallied and nosedived, leaving the typical buy and hold 401k investor with net gains of absolutely nothing. In a market like this, the wealth-draining returns the government's offering look almost attractive. But it's a real rock-and-a-hard-place predicament. But this situation isn't hopeless. It's still possible to come out ahead in this day and age. Way ahead, in fact. All you need is a comprehensive, systematic solution that'll guide you where you need to be. What investments you need to be in when real underlying strength is building, and where you need to be out as momentum begins to wane and weakness starts to take over. And in today's hustle and bustle world, you need to be able to do it in just minutes a week. A simple means to take back control of your wealth and your future, rather than leave them in the hands of those who have no real concern for your welfare, or worse, would just as soon have you pay for their past sins. And that's what I want to share with you today. I call it the Profits Watch Portfolio. The Profits Watch Portfolio is a proprietarily developed system that has been years in the making. It tracks thousands of investment opportunities daily, from stocks to bonds. Not every bond is a losing proposition. To currencies to commodities. It carefully weighs a proprietary mix of internal technical measures, filtering out the emotions and misinformation in the media that the market and investors too often react to. It uncovers what we believe are the best investing opportunities and signals the actions you need to take in a simple to understand dashboard. And best of all, implementing it will take you less than 30 minutes a month. It's the culmination of my nearly 40 years of research and study in the markets. Don't be put off by the description. This is not an in and out type of trading tool. This proprietary system has been optimized to track larger parameters. That means you only need to check on your positions about once every month. I truly believe this objective system of research and analysis will be your best defense against the wealth-draining schemes the government has planned for you and investors everywhere. And I want to give you an opportunity to check it out absolutely risk-free. All I'd ask in exchange is for you to take a no-risk test drive of our brand new financial intelligence briefing, The Wealthy Skeptic. We've designed The Wealthy Skeptic to answer investors' most pressing concerns. The Wealthy Skeptic is a no-holds-barred expose that reveals the truth of what's happening in the economy here and around the world, as well as how it's impacting financial markets, especially your investments. It'll unmask the shenanigans the government is undertaking, let you insulate your money from unscrupulous powers that would bleed you into poverty, and help you grow wealthy instead of earning returns that leave you perpetually behind the rising cost of living. Here's what you'll get when you take a trial run. Your monthly edition of The Wealthy Skeptic, rushed to your door and your inbox. In addition, access to the Profits Watch portfolio. Each issue is packed with the critical bare-knuckles analysis you need to stay on top of the economic and financial shifts that could threaten your wealth. We'll cover topics like macro market developments. Upheavals in the markets don't just happen. They are almost always the result of bigger picture developments, like an earthquake is the result of pressure that builds up in the Earth's crust. The only way to keep from being blindsided by market shocks is by carefully staying in tune of what the big picture is telling you. You'll stay on top of what the government is proposing and understand the truth about what their planned actions mean for you. Remember, contrary to what they'd have you believe, the government isn't working in your best interests. They have an agenda, just like their current plan to deal with the atrocious debt monster they've created. Listening to promises from the government is just about the worst action you can take. You'll get the investment recommendations you need that'll put you miles ahead of the rest of the market. Simple actions that'll take mere minutes or less to execute each month in your online or offline brokerage account. But actions that'll protect you from the traps that await other unsuspecting investors. And you'll get it all in clear, plain English. No high-level financial jargon that'll leave you more confused than when you started. Plus, you'll get access to the Profits Watch portfolio every month. A systematic, objective selection of the strongest securities in the market today. In one glance, you'll know which ones are worth buying, which ones to hold, and which ones to get out of to protect your assets. And not only that, if you'll agree to take a look at our work today, I have a special gift for you. As you begin to grow your wealth and build a sustainable investment portfolio that'll secure your future, you're going to need something more. You're going to need the know-how to protect that wealth from virtually any catastrophe or crisis that might otherwise take it from you. And believe me, there are threats lurking everywhere. From the specter of massive inflation to a cratering financial system, to the manipulations of a government bent on taking your savings for themselves. Now, to help protect you from all of them, to arm you with all the know-how you need, I want to send you absolutely free our Crisis Survival Kit. It'll show you 3 vital steps to protecting your wealth and all your assets. Step 1, protect your wealth. When the impact of the Fed's $1.6 trillion printing spree is finally felt, it's going to devastate a lot of investors. Skyrocketing, hyperinflated prices will drain your nest egg and whatever savings you might have right before your eyes. You're going to need the best strategies to protect yourself from the meltdown and purchasing power of your dollars. To protect you from that frightening eventuality, we put together an intelligence briefing we call the Simple Gold and Silver Guide. And I want you to have it absolutely free. Everyone understands why owning precious metals is so important. This critical resource will show you how. It'll give you all the fundamentals you need to understand to put the inflation-slashing power of precious metals to work for you. In it, you'll discover why a gold standard is absolutely critical for a healthy and thriving global currency market and the massive dangers that build beneath the surface without one. Should you buy physical gold? What about ETFs or gold futures? You'll discover the best forms you can buy and hold for you. Plus, discover the 6 required questions you must ask before ever purchasing gold or silver. And discover the safest places to store your gold. How to sell your gold, including critical tax implications you must know, and much, much more. Now, don't be caught flat-footed when, not if, inflation hits the fan. If you don't understand the ins and outs of pricing, buying, owning, and selling gold, you're exposing yourself and your wealth to a huge risk. You'll get everything you need in this comprehensive first-step guide. Take a no-risk test drive of the Weekly Skeptic today, and I'll rush this critical report to your email inbox. Step 2, protect yourself and ones you love. Once booming urban metropolises everywhere are declaring bankruptcy, or at least knocking on its door. Scranton, Pennsylvania, and San Bernardino, California are just 2 of the most recent victims of local fiscal mismanagement. They've joined the ranks of other cities now unable to pay their obligations, including their civil employees like police and firefighters. Cutbacks in these critical areas exponentially increase the risk of civil unrest. As prosperity runs out, it won't take long for these cities themselves to turn into urban jungles, where crime is rampant, where you take your life in your hands simply trying to get to your job, and where even basic necessities for living become scarce or completely unavailable. Will you be ready if this happens to the city where you live or in one nearby? You must be able to protect yourself, your family, and your wealth no matter what happens. I'll show you how to do it in your second step of crisis survival, a strategic briefing titled Urban Survival Solutions and Tactics, Surviving the Economic Collapse. This eye-opening report will show you the reality of the situations that are developing around you right now, what you need to do to head them off, and what to do if the worst-case scenario happens. In it, you'll see the complete and total inability of the government to restore any semblance of order or prosperity when all hell breaks loose. Unbelievable threats you'd never expect to face from those who were sworn to protect and defend you. How to assemble a go bag, every critical step, from the bag itself to what you need in it. What you must have to survive financially, especially when money is no longer an option, and much more. Now, don't kid yourself into thinking it can only happen in someone else's town. Be sure you're ready for any eventuality with this shocking report. Simply let me know you'd like to take a trial of The Wealthy Skeptic, and I'll rush your copy to you. Step 3, protect everything else you own. Finally, I want to send you the ultimate asset protection tool. It's titled Financial Self-Defense, How to Protect Everything You Own from Everyone, Every Time. It's nothing short of an essential and comprehensive primer on some of the most sophisticated and legal tactics you can use to protect yourself and your wealth from virtually any attack on your wealth. It's over 200 pages that will lay out strategic plans that will protect your home or other real estate investments against any attack or lien, how to build a fortress around your business or professional practice to shield them from external attacks or even internal disruptions in the business, protecting your most valuable asset, your nest egg. In an attack on your wealth, everything is fair game, and protecting your future should be your highest priority. Here's how. The single most important key to understand in order to steal all your assets from frivolous lawsuits, and much more. This is an absolute must-have for any individual who hopes to grow and keep any significant wealth. Similar resources have been sold for as much as $149. But even at that price, the knowledge you'll get in a comprehensive resource like this is a bargain, because the strategies and tactics it contains could be priceless to any investor when they need them. This is a must-have if you have any significant amount of wealth, and even more important, if you only have a modest amount to protect. Remember, the clock is ticking on the very real possibility of a government default. The first time they can't borrow enough to make their minimum payments, it's game over. And the Fed won't be able to keep them afloat for much longer. They're coming after your money right now to defuse their ticking time bomb of debt. It's up to you to take action to protect yourself and your loved ones. That means you have a decision to make. You can either let the government have their way and sacrifice everything you've worked so hard to earn, or you can take a few simple steps to protect what's yours and start growing your wealth for your family and your future. Listen, I know it may sound hard to believe that the government would actually take steps to secretly bleed its own citizens' prosperity to cover their fiscal mismanagement. But if you've come this far, you've seen the steps they've already taken. You know what their intention is. And like I've shown you in this report, they've done it before. They've already put their current plan in motion. The only question is whether you'll let them get away with it. How long before you realize the returns you make on your investments are no longer keeping pace with the prices of everything else around you? How long before you start really feeling the pinch of skyrocketing food prices? How long before the strain of filling your gas tank starts taking away from other things you need? How long until you realize what the government is not only planning, but actually doing to you? I certainly hope it won't be long, because the longer you wait, the further behind you'll fall. Those who have no idea, or worse, refuse to believe what's going on, are going to suffer the worst. I certainly hope you and your family won't be among them. All you need to do to avoid that fate is give our research a look. And right now you can do that with absolutely no risk or obligation. Just let me know that you'd like a trial subscription of The Wealthy Skeptic, and I'll immediately send you your first issue. Along with that, you'll get immediate access to your 3-step crisis survival kit, the Simple Gold and Silver Guide, Urban Survival Solutions and Tactics, Surviving the Economic Collapse, and Financial Self-Defense, How to Protect Everything You Own from Everyone, Every Time. This is a complete package that'll light your path out of the government's poverty trap for you and give you everything you need to protect your growing wealth in the future. So how much does my work cost? How can you get started? Well, a 1-year subscription, including everything I mentioned here, normally costs $99 per year. But right now, you can try my research for 95% off the normal rate. You'll pay just $4.95 for an entire year. Why are we offering all this proprietary research and wealth-preserving strategies at such an affordable price? It's simple. It's my belief that very often the cost of not having the information and knowledge you need is far greater than the cost of obtaining it. And those out there who don't know about the government's plan are in real danger. So to make sure everyone can have access, that we can get this critical message to the maximum number of people, we've decided to offer it at an irresistible price. How fast could one investment that returns you money far in excess of the rate of inflation, one that helps you grow your wealth, pay for an entire subscription, or even an entire lifetime subscription? And you can get it with absolutely no risk or obligation. Like I said before, sign up now while it's still fresh in your mind, and you can take a full 60 days to examine everything. If in that time you decide for any reason that our work and research isn't right for you, simply contact us and you'll receive a full and courteous refund. No questions asked. Now that means that by taking me up on my offer today, you're only agreeing to try our research, to prove to yourself that it's everything I've claimed it is. Now, I've shown you the dangers that are staring you and every American like you squarely in the face, and I've offered you a no-risk solution that'll let you escape its clutches. What you do now is up to you. Will you stay on the path to poverty that the government has paved for you? Or will you get off that path and onto the expressway to wealth and security? The choice is yours. I hope you'll take this opportunity seriously. The wheels of the government's plan are already in motion. You might well be a victim even as we speak. I sincerely believe checking out The Wealthy Skeptic will be one of the best moves you can make for yourself and your family's future. To get started, simply click on the subscribe button below. It'll take you to our secure, encrypted order form. We'll process your order immediately, and you'll have access to everything in a matter of minutes.